On paper, Never Awake is not really my sort of thing. I like classic fixed direction shmups. Never Awake is a twin stick. I think roughly 5 to 7 stages that take 20 to 30 minutes to clear is the sweet spot in terms of length. Never Awake has at least 70 stages and it took me 4 hours to see the first ending. I like going stage to stage without a break, and for power-ups to be in-stage pickups. Never Awake has a shop with an ever-expanding range of weapons and stat buffs where you mix and match your loadout between each stage. Fortunately, however, as football pundits never tire of telling us, the game is not played on paper, and the reality is that I absolutely loved Never Awake, couldn't stop playing it until I'd reached that first ending, and I'm still playing it now to try and complete the additional post-game missions. And talk of post-game missions will no doubt clue you in straight away to the fact that Never Awake is structured very differently to your standard shmup. However, instead of this break from tradition, seeing the game lose a lot of what makes shmups so satisfying, this new approach takes the good points from both shmups and other console games and mixes them into something unique that has a special appeal all its own. Before we get to the game's structure though, let's just have a quick look at Never Awake's gameplay mechanics. It is a twin stick, meaning you can fire in any direction with the right stick. Unlike most twin sticks though, Never Awake auto-scrolls, meaning it feels a lot more like a regular shmup to play. You have 2 weapons, a standard unlimited shot and a special shot with a limited number of uses. The special shot can be changed and the variations really are pretty major. My preferred choice was usually the shotgun blast, but there are others that can come closer to being bombs, with the more powerful weapons allowing fewer uses, and there's something everywhere in between. You also have a dash maneuver that lets you speed over a small distance without taking any harm. Enemies come at you from all sides, and instead of hovering at the back of the screen, you're going to spend most of your time defending your position in the centre. Nothing particularly revolutionary, but everything is well worked, and both the movement and shooting feels satisfying to play around with, and although there's only one character, the weapon variety does enough to mix things up. It's in the way the game progresses, however, that things get really interesting. Never Awake is broken up into stages, and as mentioned, there are at least 70 of them. Stages are grouped into themed worlds a la Super Mario, so you have for example World 1 Stage 1, World 2 Stage 6 and so on. You unlock them in a mostly linear fashion, and boss fights, instead of coming at the end of a stage, are classed as their own stage each. All of these stages are relatively bite-sized, and due to the game's twin stick shooting mechanic are able to scroll horizontally, vertically or a mixture of both. This is already a pretty big departure then from regular shmup structure, but the more interesting part is how each individual stage is internally structured, as they have replaced the usual start, middle and end with a looping mechanism that sees you traverse a certain area and then at a certain point be brought back to the start to keep going. Except each time the stage loops, it increases the challenge from what usually starts as relatively gentle all the way up to rather mean indeed. The question naturally then is, how do you actually beat a stage? Well, the answer is contained in the percentage gauge at the top of the screen. This is your soul gauge, and defeated enemies drop souls. Collect souls to increase your percentage, and when you hit 100%, no matter where you are or what's going on around you, the stage ends. The survival play strategy then is to grab as many souls as you can, as quickly as you can. And if you're doing this efficiently, you should be able to complete each stage even before the end of the first loop. This goes for bosses too. After dealing enough damage, they drop souls, and if you collect them, each time you will be whisked away before the boss is even defeated. However, maybe you want to defeat the boss. Maybe you want to get a high score, or maybe you just want to give yourself a challenge, some of which Never Awake will even orchestrate for you in its post-game. In that case, you can deliberately avoid filling the soul gauge and keep looping and looping for as long as you can stand the pressure. And if you do so, you will be rewarded with a higher and higher score. It's a really unusual but smartly worked system that, although it can take some getting used to, and I certainly wouldn't want it in every game, I think here is quite brilliantly done. To aid you on your way, whether you're playing for survival or score, is a shop accessible between stages in which you can both purchase weapons as well as pick up a variety of stat buffs to fill a limited number of slots. If you just want to beat the game, you might increase the number of souls that spawn, equip a magnet for drawing souls towards you, and give yourself more attack power to take out as many enemies as possible in the first loop. If you're going for score though, you can reduce the number of souls and boost your health, for example, to allow you to keep going for longer. Or of course you can go anywhere in between, whatever suits. Because the good thing is, no matter what you choose, there never feels like a wrong option, and you never feel underpowered. It's not a question of there being an optimal setup that you have to spend time figuring out. Everything helps, and you just pick the ones you want most. I have to say, I found the whole thing really addictive, and because each stage is so short, it can be really hard to resist diving in for just one more stage to either see what it offers, or test out your latest weapon or stat buff. It's a different appeal to your regular arcade shmup, and I wouldn't necessarily refer to Neverwake as being refined in its mechanics, but what it does offer is solid enough shmup gameplay in a really unusual and appealing structure, and I really enjoyed it. It's also, of course, quite unusual visually, in more than one way. The first way is in its setting. You play as a kind of dream or spirit version of a young girl who is asleep in what seems to be a hospital bed. In each stage, the enemies you're dealing with are related to the girl's fears or dislikes, meaning you might be taking on monstrous forms of green vegetables, nightmarish barking dogs, or sinister versions of the girl's own friends and family members. Snippets from the girl's diary pop up between stages, and these are usually short and worth reading, both to provide a bit of background to what's going on and to add to the game's somewhat poignant atmosphere. The other way the visuals are unusual is in their sheer quality. Everything is really detailed, and there's a weight and solidity to both your own character and the enemies that put me in mind of the excellent horror puzzle game Little Nightmares. I will say it might have been nice to mix the atmosphere up just a little here and there, but the visuals certainly more than do their job of building up a dark and somewhat oppressive atmosphere, although they never stray fully into anything that could be described as actual horror. The music matches the setting pretty perfectly, with a certain darkness to its melodies while still being kinda catchy. There's a kind of abandoned funfair sort of vibe to a lot of it, and all in all, presentation is just top notch. There's also a post-game that presents you with challenges in about a third of the game's stages, with these being things like making sure to go all the way to killing a boss, or picking up 100% of souls before the end of the first loop, with these unlocking some gallery images and some further story details. It does take several hours just to beat the main game first time though, and I can absolutely assure you, no one is going to find Neverwake wanting in terms of content. In fact, other than purists for whom this may just simply not be the right choice, I can't imagine many people are going to come away from Neverwake finding it wanting in almost any department. It's not the most refined or original mechanically as a pure shmup, but it more than makes up for that with its great visuals, addictive gameplay, and wholly unique stage progression system. I would give it an 8.5 overall, and I thoroughly recommend it to both shmup fans and non-shmup fans alike. Physical copies are available, by the way, from Japanese retail and are not sold in limited quantities, so should be easy enough to get your hands on. Let us know your own thoughts if you have given Neverwake a try, and thanks very much for watching. See you next time. Cheers.